Hey everyone, and welcome to the Holistic Health Guide podcast. I'm Catherine Berg from Lotus Homeopathy, and I'll be your host for today. This is a bonus episode that I wanted to share with you because it is the right time of year for this particular content. One of the best things about living in Minnesota and the upper Midwest in general is getting to experience the change of season. But for some people, this brings on an acute or chronic illness. It could be seasonal allergies, or it could be a cough, pink eye, any number of things that appear when there is a change of weather. And even if this doesn't describe you, it might happen when you return home from a winter trip to a warm climate. And I would call that a sudden change of weather. There are definitely remedies for that. I've absolutely had clients that have experienced this after their vacation. In this bonus episode, we will discuss homeopathic remedies for coughs that come on from change of weather, specifically from warm weather to cool weather. In homeopathy, we watch for things like warm days and cool nights, which is typical upper Midwest weather. And we'll talk about 7 possible remedies. And if you hang around until the end, you will hear of an 8th remedy that you probably haven't heard of before, but is really helpful, even when the weather doesn't change. And even if you don't experience weather like this, there are still symptoms and remedies that will make knowing these cough remedies helpful. So let's get started, shall we? Have you ever wondered how your favorite holistic health practices really work? Are you curious to learn more? Welcome to Holistic Health Guide. I'm Catherine Berg, a classical homeopath with over 20 years of experience. Join us as we explore homeopathy, stem cell activation patches, the Enneagram, and much more. Let's dive in and uncover the secrets and tips behind your favorite holistic health modalities. Before we get started on talking about remedies for change of weather from warm weather to cold weather, let's discuss what you'll learn by listening to this episode. There are many things that come on when the weather changes, but we're going to focus on coughs. And the other thing we'll be doing is giving you a mental and emotional picture of each of these remedies that we're talking about, because sometimes people just don't feel well when the weather changes. And it isn't that they have a cough, but there's just sort of this general malaise that comes over them, especially when the weather changes from warm to chilly, which is, of course, what we have coming up here in the Northern Hemisphere and certainly in the upper Midwest. These remedies can help those conditions too. I'm excited to have you learn about these remedies, so we'll move on. Before we get started on talking about our remedies that we're going to learn today, let's talk about whether a change of weather can actually make you sick. There are a lot of people who say it cannot, that it's all in your head or it's a coincidence. But as a homeopath and in homeopathy school, we discussed this particular issue because there are certain things you need to be taking note of when you are trying to find remedies for your family. And this is one of the things is you look around and you see what the weather is. I have clients from all over the country, and when they're sick, I will often ask, well, what's the weather doing right there? Here's a little quote that I just want to talk about from a well-known homeopath named Rajan Sankaran. He has written a lot of books on homeopathy and developed a lot of systems to help it be easier to determine remedies for clients. When a person falls ill, there are at first functional changes taking place in the body. And the body tries somehow to adjust itself successfully to the new internal or external environment. And in attempts to resist, neutralize, and nullify the morbid influences, whether it be within the body, like the bacteria, or, for example, a sudden change of weather. And if the body is able to successfully adjust itself, there is no disease and therefore no symptom. But if there is failure of such adjustment, in part or in full, disease results and becomes evident by altered sensations and functions. Medicine homeopathic definition of disease is there are altered sensations and improper functions. What this means is that our body should be able to fight it off, but sometimes it can't. I remember a classmate when I was in elementary school who every spring would miss a week or so of school because he would get pneumonia. And sometimes you outgrow those kinds of things, but sometimes you don't. This bolded statement here is about our body's ability to adjust to whatever's going on. And when we think about dis-ease in the body, you can think about a pendulum that's stuck over to one side. And so you always respond the same way. Oh, there's a weather change in the fall. I always get a cough, that kind of thing. And so when we're healthy, this pendulum should be able to swing from side to side. And then our bodies can adapt to whatever is going on. And we're more in a state of health than in a state of dis-ease. Now, sometimes you need a constitutional remedy to get yourself out of this state of dis-ease, even though it's an acute thing that comes on. But sometimes just treating it with the proper remedy when in the fall, in this case, the next fall, it won't come back. It is definitely something that can happen is that weather can make you sick if you have dis-ease associated with the change in weather. Possible for change of weather to make you sick chronically, especially if you have some chronic illness and your acute flare-up comes when there's a change of weather. And it's not what we're talking about particularly. Instead, we're talking about acute illnesses. It could be headaches, it could be cough, they could be conjunctivitis or pink eye and other infections. Or just, as I mentioned earlier, generally not feeling well, sort of malaise. Maybe there's a slight fever. uh, You just feel cruddy. So we're going to focus in on cough. So here are the remedies that we're going to learn today. Cover coughs from change of weather. Aconite, which is probably pretty familiar to a lot of you. Veg, rubrum, which is probably new to most of you. Dulcamara, may or may not be new to you. Phosphorus. I just want to throw a little note in here about phosphorus. So I always like when I'm managing to teach people things that is appropriate. And before today, I had a client call me, and her daughter had a cough that comes on every fall. And I remember we discussed it earlier this year. And I just said, well, maybe her constitutional remedy will have taken care of it. If it didn't, and this cough comes on in the fall, just be sure and get a hold of me. And she did, because the cough returned, and to give her phosphorus. So it's pretty good on that. And we'll talk more about phosphorus and symptoms that are important for phosphorus when we get to that section. Rumex crispus, Spongia, which a lot of people use, just sort of, they have a barking cough. They use Spongia without actually choosing the remedy based on its symptoms and the symptoms of the patient. And Verbascum thapsus, which is homeopathic mullein. So, all right, let's get started with our first remedy. So, the remedy we're going to talk about is aconite. Labels, if you buy it in the store, it will say Aconitum napellus. And aconite's pretty well known to anybody who's done much with homeopathy at all. And it's well known for any symptoms that come on after being exposed to the weather on a cold, dry, windy day. Interesting thing happened. So this was many years ago, and my client called me, and her husband had developed viral meningitis. And it was the middle of January, and it was freezing cold out. And I kind of knew what he needed already. I did want to verify it, and asked what his mood was. What's his mental emotional state? And she said that he was afraid he was going to die, which is an aconite symptom, and very strong aconite symptom. And so she buzzed over to my house, and I gave her some aconite to give to him. And it happened to him the year before when it had gotten cold, and it's about 2 weeks of work with taking the aconite. He was back in 2 days. And they had given him a spinal tap of some sort also, and that was causing him problems. So I was able to get him some lead to help resolve those problems as well. So whenever symptoms appear with aconite, they'll likely make you feel a bit fearful. And here's some of the most common cough symptoms of aconite. It's a barking cough, which is also common in Spongia and several other remedies. It's croupy sounding. Cold drinks aggravate the cough. That's important. It's generally a dry cough. I mean, it can be loose or wet, but it's generally dry. So here are some more cough symptoms. They aggravated lying down, some itching, tickling, or irritation. And I'm not going to mention that on any of the other slides because honestly, almost all the remedies have it. About a change on weather, which means a change of temperature, but it also can be very specific to a change of temperature, like in a room. And a lot of these remedies have these symptoms. So pay attention to that as well. All right, let's move on to our next remedy, which is carbovegetabilis or carboveg, as it's usually called. Veg has reputation for being a remedy, the really low vitality. It can even appear lifeless. Often it is true that they are on the verge of passing over into the life. And it could also be from a loss of fluids, from medicine drugs, other diseases. And these are some important general symptoms. Their head might be hot. They want air, proved by being fanned or having the window open, even if they're chilly. Because vitality, you are often very chilly and you're not warm. So just really important in that way. And carbo veg, by the way, is made from burned vegetable matter. So it's a very debilitated state. And who needs carbo veg might have never even fully recovered from a previous illness. Does sound familiar. Somebody with a long haul COVID could benefit from carbo veg, it's been a high potency. And then the mental state is sluggish and slow to kind of match the physical state. Okay, so here are some symptoms. And cold, damp, and wet air aggravates the cough. Lyme is common, and hacking cough also. I love this symptom. Hard, violent waves of coughing not ceasing until masses of offensive sputum are raised. So that seems like an important symptom for you to pay attention to. Um, and it can be a coughing fit of 3 or 4 coughs. And baratro also has this symptom. So kind of like, and then they'll stop, and then again, something like that. And a suffocative cough. Interestingly, coughing while walking outside in open air or walking rapidly, covering or undressing makes the cough worse. So they might want to stay covered. And a lot of remedies, clean weeding cough as well. So that's carbo-veg. Our next remedy is Corellium rubrum. And Corellium rubrum is a remedy that comes from red coral. Rubrum meaning red. And this has got some very specific symptoms. And if you need it, you'll probably know. But let's start with some mental symptoms first. You're ill humored, irascible, and worries about pain because it could be a painful cough. Bewildered, as if having too much to drink. So if your patient has, a little off, like they've been drinking or something, yeah, think about this remedy. The other symptom. Their head feels large. Sometimes people's head feel enlarged because they've got, stuffing. The cough symptom. A cough when the attack comes on with very rapid cough and the attacks follow so closely as to almost run into each other. This is what they call a machine gun cough. Okay? Gun cough. Something like that. The minute this minute gun cough, which is not the same as a machine gun cough, so don't get them confused, where the patient gives an isolated cough at regular intervals throughout the day, or throughout the hour, or throughout the minute. So it would just kind of be like, so there's something like that. Think about Corellium rubra. Cough post nasal drip. Probably a lot of the remedies have that, but this one is no. A pill cough. Remember, I said they worry, so the pain might hurt them in some way. It would also cause them some distress. Since we don't really know this remedy all that well, I want to just make sure I present a few more symptoms for you. One of these is a cough in pregnancy. That could be a cough that comes on in bad weather or change of weather while you're pregnant. A reverberating cough, which is very reverberating through the room, almost an echo, and breath before they cough. And off on inhaling. And you'll see that there are lots of remedies that have that issue of coughing from breathing in deeply, especially. And the face red ball coughing. That's also an important of Corellian rubrum. And given that it red core, this isn't a surprise. Dulcamara is sort of the flagship remedy for warm, cool nights and the illness that can come on from that. And for growing up, I used this remedy fairly frequently this time of year. I had a son who tended to get respiratory issues for um, quite a few years of his life until I found a really good remedy that helped that go away. And then my other son, I can remember um, actually missing a soccer game. So Dulcamara, it is also called Solanum Dulcamara, but there are so many remedies that start Solanum or are in the Solanaceae family, Dulcamara, and it's also called bittersweet nightshade. And this is not the climbing bittersweet that looks so lovely in fall arrangements. It's not that. It's something different. As I said, is a key remedy for any ailments that might come up with warm basil. So, especially here in the upper Midwest, that's exactly what happens. So, always to keep this one in mind. And by the way, I mean, it does affect spring, but it means on our remedies in our repertory, and this is pretty low rating spring, but very high rating. Sensitivity to the cold and damp is common in all the Solanaceae remedies, but as described by Dr. Singh, it is supreme in Dulcamara. And some of the other Solanaceae remedies, by the way, are belladonna, thiocyanate, so remedium, you know. So someone who needs Dulcamara will be disturbed by not weather changes, but even suddenly body by talking about Dulcamara and is enough to really consider in the equation. Talk about this in fall, but for Dulcamara and Aconite, especially um, when you get back from a vacation in the so you it's cold here and you go somewhere south and it's warm and you're enjoying yourself and you get back and you're exposed to some kind of cold day. Those are first two remedies I would consider. So it isn't people say, I always get sick when I come home from vacation. Well, it isn't because you've come home from vacation. It's because you've come home from vacation in the winter and you've gone somewhere warm. So that would be dry and even weather. All conditions are worse from cold and damp. Dulcamara is worse in the evening, nighttime, and at rest, and, which of course is when most of us rest, is that night. Concentration is difficult, especially if their ailment is accompanied by a headache. So this would be, you're sick and can't do their homework because they've got this slight headache, and it's just they can't. That would be. Hmm, Even if they don't have a cough, you could think, maybe I need to give the child some Dulcamara. Capriciousness is the next thing. And we think about capriciousness, we think of chamomilla. But Dulcamara has this symptom as well. And they want things and then they refuse it. Really want things they can't have. So capriciousness is something to look for with dog. If there's a ball. I don't. Dulcamara can be bossy and dictatorial. They can have claustrophobia, so they don't like small places. Lots of moaning and groaning and tossing around at night, restless. Remember back on the previous how they were worse and better from at rest. Yes, so they're a little bit restless, and that make you think about arsenicum or rest talk. But we need to look at the whole picture of what's going on. And they are suspicious and mistrustful, and they are bugged by small things. It isn't very often that people get given Dulcamara as a constitutional remedy, which is a remedy for your entire being. But by gosh, there's a lot of people that match these mental and emotional symptoms, aren't there? Could be a remedy, a constitutional remedy for someone. I'm not suggesting you give it, but I think it is very often. Probably not. Probably people give Nux vomica or something like that instead. Symptoms for Dulcamara. And you're going to get Dulcamara probably more on the generals and the mental emotionals than even the but it is a barking cough. But as you can see, several of the remedies that we have in this course, everyone seems to go to Spongia right away, the barking cough, but not necessarily. Breathing deeply aggravates or brings up the cough. So that when that happens, that would be to consider. Cold, wet, and open air aggravates the cough. And also getting wet can cause a cough. That hacking hoarse cough with a feeling of rawness in the larynx or the voice box. So you might notice that feeling more when you're talking than when you're coughing. But hoarse coughs, not everybody has a hoarse cough, so pay attention to that particular symptom. Entering a warm room from the outside aggravates the cough. We've talked about that with other remedies. And a whistling, wheezing cough. There are some of these. Let's now talk about phosphorus. This is a pretty common remedy for coughs and acute illnesses in an adult. And phosphorus also have some very specific symptoms. And this is a great, I love this symptom, that it's lying on the left aggravates and turning to the right side ameliorates. And I have to share a story with you about this symptom. So early on, when I first learned about homeopathy, I was probably 2 years into kind of learning about it on my own, and I had a few books, and I had a little repertory materia medica book. And I had this bad cough, so I was lying on my left side on the couch, and I was coughing like crazy, and just sort of out of instinct, as a thinking, let me see if I feel better on the other side. I was just trying anything to get comfortable. So I turned over to my right side and I noticed I stopped coughing. And so had this little book that I mentioned and I pulled it up and sure enough, phosphorus listed that particular symptom. And so I took it and it was like a miracle to me, as it almost always is still after over 20 years. It was just miraculous that it stopped my cough. Now, I had a little extra side benefit from it, and that is that I had canceled and rescheduled the dental appointment. I had a crack in my tooth and I needed to get a crown, but I canceled it because of this cough that I had. And that happened though is my tooth got better and the pain went away from the crack. Now, the remedy was not going to fix the crack in the tooth, but it did buy me some time and relieve some pain until I get in to have that tooth fixed after the cough went away. And of course, I had canceled it before I tried the remedy, right? So just kind of an interesting little side benefit that sometimes happens when you take an acute remedy is that something else gets better too that you weren't expecting. Air can aggravate, as we know other remedies. And here's an interesting one. Coughing from constriction in the larynx or tightness in the voice box, basically, especially during sleep or upon first falling asleep and lying on your side. So and then it's a complicated symptom. But all of these kinds of things like, well, down and let me see how your cough is. Lie on this side, lie on that side. Happens with people. You have to be really alert to symptoms. And another symptom important for phosphorus is that exertion aggravates the cough. And girl that I told you about, whose mother called me, particular symptom. And so I actually modified this slide and re-recorded this particular slide just to be able to share that symptom. You're going to want so some more phosphorus symptoms. It's a really important one, and I just want to mention too much. I feel like that, and to gear things out to patient if warm drinks or cold drinks help not only a cough but a sore throat and eating as well, because don't ask those questions, and so it's harder to find the remedy. But both warm and cold drinks can aggravate a phosphorus cough, but only cold drinks can ameliorate a phosphorus cough. And so, this I was telling you about were helpful for her cough, but just phosphorus can like there are foreign bodies in the larynx. Is better going outside and going from a warm room to cold air or vice versa. And again, the whistling, weaseling, wheezing cough. So here are the rest of the phosphorus symptoms that we're going to learn about. Um, is working in open air or cold air. But what's interesting is that the cough can also be better from being in the open air. It can be worse or better. The worst associated generally with walking. But interestingly, all tubercular remedies, which is what phosphorus category of disease that phosphorus falls into is tuberculosis. Tubercular remedies are better at being in the open air. You might know that took from back in the early 1900s where they'd be up in the mountains and they'd be sitting outside on porches to help with the tuberculosis. So, and there was a reason for it is because it made people better. So the cough is better outside. And beginning, I told you that I had a client who called me and she had some pretty interesting symptoms. And I was the two, and I talked to the little girl. She's about 8 or 9, and she's been outside. How is your cough outside? She said it's better. So that I figured out that this was the remedy that she needed. The can make the cough either better or worse. And the cough can be worse while talking or talking loudly. And here's an interesting one. The cough is from touching the ear canal. So I'll ever do that. But if you're thinking of phosphorus and you need a confirmation, you could try that. Um, there's a lot of general phosphorus symptoms um, because the cough has such specific symptoms that it's pretty easy to tell. But include being tired a lot, weary, one's company, a little nervous, but not like arsenicum anxiety. Um, just be sort of average too, especially in like the situation of this. She was generally healthy. It was just in the fall, this always came up. But the weird and the tiredness often comes up are actually sicker than she is. So that's phosphorus. So here's a remedy some of you might not have ever heard of, and it's called Rumex crispus, and it's a plant called yellow dock, and it's on this list of the barking cough remedies. And breathing deeply aggravates this cough, as does changing the rhythm of breathing. So, if you're down or you're going upstairs or going downstairs, that can change the rhythm of breathing. So that's kind of an important symptom, which is not in very many remedies. And irritation and tickling, but this one often has a sensation of a feather in the throat pit. And the throat pit is that little notch in your neck. Um, Rumex is the number one remedy for tickling in the throat, the chest, and behind the sternum, the throat pit. I mean, it always the first I try to see if it fits. If it doesn't fit, then I have to find another one. But it is a pretty good remedy for that. I've been using it, since I really practiced for people. And in fact, I still an old tube of it that's probably been expired. Coughing when lying down or as soon as the head touches the I'm going to talk just briefly about the mental and emotional picture of Rumex. Because there are so many remedies that have this tickling in the throat, we need to be able to distinguish it some other way. They have thoughts about disagreeable things, thoughts, and there's a lot of stagnation in this remedy, and you'll see it in the mental sphere that work and mental exacerbate. So, what's the opposite of working hard? Stagnation. Um, they're Um, this was kind of interesting. I've honestly never given this remedy as a constitutional remedy, and this probably shows up then. But just in case you have a child that starts drawing weird monsters and evil, weird things when they have a cough, definitely consider this remedy. And they'll just all be irritable. One's favorite remedy for barking coughs, and that is Spongia. And it's one choice that people make, but it isn't necessarily always the best choice. And cough, but it's deep seated barking or choking. And it's interesting that a lot of times when a cough originates someplace, we can identify it, but coughs don't always originate in the heart. And so the larynx is very common, but it can also originate from the heart. If somebody actually says, I feel like that's where it's coming. It's worse from alcoholic drinks. And here's the same symptom that phosphorus had as well. And here are some more spongia symptoms. They are convulsive, spasmodic coughs, and they're often worse before midnight and with emotional excitement. So maybe somebody's having a birthday party or something like that, or they get upset about something. Could be a positive or negative emotional excitement. Cold drinks aggravate, warm drinks ameliorate. Again, I'm emphasizing some of these symptoms. Really important to check on those before you pick out a remedy. A cold draft of air can cause a coughing jag. So let's say somebody opens the door and they've been outside and this cold draft of air comes in. That would be something to pay attention to. And there's the air passages with spongia. Warm or it ameliorates a cough. There's something we don't talk about very often. I often will ask my clients about cold or warm drinks, but I don't always ask about food. So that's another important area for you to be looking at when you're trying to come up with remedies for coughs. And then the last symptom, Gia, we've talked about this irritation is that it can be one spot in the larynx where it feels like there's a particular spot. So that's important for you to notice. And that lying down makes it worse if on the right side, especially. And oops, well, I guess it is. And including so many on spongias, first of all, that have a lot of symptoms, but also um, just so that you switch between spongia and some of these other barking coughs, so that you don't always just spongia right away because it might not be the right one. It might help manage the cough, but if it doesn't help the cough go away, then it's time to look at some of those other barking coughs that we are talking about today. Here's an interesting symptom that reading either aloud or to oneself can aggravate the cough. And how would you see this? You would see it when somebody maybe shuts off the TV and decides to read, or they don't read. So they TV and it's your child, and you're saying, "Well, you should probably read." That might be why they don't want to read. Finally, some of the mental and emotional symptoms of spongia, because we don't really talk about this remedy very much. It does not want sympathy, so don't give it in the cough. And this includes a fear of death, suffocation, or that the cough will never go away. They could even panic from the cough. So that would make you think also of aconite, really. So if somebody has a cough and they're singing and they're not usually a singer, I would think about this remedy. About their complaints make worse. And how you might see that actually is that they might be talking about them because in order to talk about them, you have to think about them. And so their cough might get worse. Before we get to that last remedy that I promised you, I wanted to acknowledge that this is a much longer episode than usual. And we covered a lot of remedies. And those remedies all had a lot of symptoms. Knowing that it would be hard for you to keep track of all those symptoms, I created a handout of all the remedies we discussed so you can keep it handy and have the symptoms available for you should one of your friends or your family develop a cough with the upcoming change in weather. And even better, there are 3 bonus remedies in the handout that we didn't talk about, but might be equally as helpful as the rest of them. Remember, these remedies are specific to coughs, but can also work if there's just a general feeling of not feeling well that comes on with the change of weather. And Dulcamara is a good remedy for that, especially, but there are others. If you would like this handout, go to www.lotushomeopathy.com/coughs and you can download the document from there. That website again is www.lotushomeopathy.com/coughs. COUGHS. If you get this handout, you'll be ready to go when the weather changes. If you don't, well, you might struggle for a while with that cough and you might not find the right remedy. Again, go to www.lotushomeopathy.com/coughs for that handout for coughs that come on with the change of the weather. And you can also find that link in the show notes. Now let's get started with that last remedy. The last remedy we're going to learn about is verbascum thapsus. And verbascum comes from William, which is well known as an herb for ear infection. Well, whenever you potentize an herb, it's going to show in a film for perhaps a part of the body. So it works like this: when you have something that's herbal, it has primary and secondary, and so do homeopathic remedies. But once you turn an herb into a remedy, it actually flips and it becomes and the secondary becomes primary. And looked up ear symptoms just out of curiosity for verbascum, and there are hardly any. Um, and general inflammation of the middle ear, but it doesn't have any fixed symptoms to help you actually pick that remedy. So, the potent type verbascum's affinity for coffee. So, and nighttime remedy. And mentally and physically, the people that are worse from excitement, and we've seen that in a couple of other remedies. So again, another word you could look needy, ask them, can be busy or lazy. Um, and they are busy can keep the restlessness at bay. Symptoms. Eating breakfast is helpful. So if they wake up and they're worse and they're coughing and they eat breakfast and they get better, definitely think about this. And they're chilly and are greatly moved by being warmed up, and they can be so cold that they shudder and shake, just like Veratra. Sitting upright any worse, but if they bend over, it's worse. So when you're again out on what helps and what works with the cough, are they better lying down? Are they better sitting up? And what position do they need to be in? No aggravates. So it doesn't mean you have to just be a snowy day, because remember, this is a weather related remedy. Symptoms. Coughing at night during, and this is especially true if the patient is a child. And though it comes on during, it doesn't necessarily disturb the sleep of the child or even the adult. So if you hear your child coughing during sleep and they're not waking up from it, definitely consider this remedy. Another one of those coffee almost constant, or it seems that way. Interestingly, verbascum is one of 44 remedies that has what we call a sympathetic cough. So they might cough for coffee, or they might cough from someone else just simply being sick. And the only other remedy that covers that symptom is yeah. So keep that in mind. It's kind of an unusual symptom, but I like to share those. And the verbascum cough, it's really loud and noisy. It's almost like Stanum in that way, but reverberating, hollow, hoarse, rough, harsh, trumpet like, um, anything that would the sound remedies we've talked about, a deep breath inward will ameliorate the cough. So can help the cough stop. Whereas with a lot of the other remedies we've talked about in this webinar, it's just the only one we've talked about that makes it better. Lying down on the back in bed, cough. This is a pretty common symptom. Up in the head, the throat, or the abdomen or umbilical region. So these are all kind of interesting, unusual symptoms. Well, that is the end of our bonus episode on coughs that come on from a change in the weather. Remember that printable handout that I have on my website that you can go download. Just go to www.lotushomeopathy.com/coughs and you can download it from there. And that link will be in the show notes. I hope you enjoyed this episode and learned from it. As usual, I always hope people don't need these remedies, but given that that is unrealistic, I hope you will take the time to download this document. If you found this podcast helpful, please rate and review the podcast and be sure to share this episode with a friend. Natural health information usually gets shared by word of mouth. Our next season is coming soon and will include information on anti aging and aging gracefully. Until then, this is Catherine Berg. Be healthy and happy.